Hi there. This is a quick first entry in a series of videos about the cinematography in House of the Dragon, compared to the mistakes made in Game of Thrones. Now, the first basic thing that stood out to a lot of people who weren't even paying attention to cinematography with a capital C is just how much brighter all of the colors look. And so many general news sites were remarking on that. I saw Angry Joe mention that. I saw Quinn's Ideas, who had given up on the franchise, came around and said I was wrong. There's a whole new set of people in charge. One thing that stood out to me is that the colors actually are really bright again. Everything isn't muted like in the late Game of Thrones season. So I was really busy, but because Quinn made that remark and that I wanted to share an explanation to him and everyone, that they actually explained this in an interview the week before the premiere in Den of Geek. And I want to quickly go over this. This is going to be a longer series. I'm cutting it up. But right now, focused on just the brightness issue, they stopped using color filters to differentiate locations. That on Game of Thrones Season 1, and this isn't even a bad idea, they would use a blue color filter plus low lighting at the wall to indicate this is a higher latitude. It's closer to the poles. It's colder. So when you look at Castle Black, everything looks a little blue. When you went to King's Landing to emphasize how much warmer it is, they'd snap a gold-orange color filter on it for warm colors. Looking back at Season 1 stuff, this pretty much worked, and a lot of other TV shows do this to differentiate geographic locations, or like space shows. Different planets have different lighting levels, contrast levels, color filters. It's normal to do this. The problem is that Benioff and Weiss took it to the point of absurdity as the show went along, that they said, well, as winter is coming, everything should have a blue color filter, even in the southern latitudes, and we should lower the light levels. To the point that by Season 7, I remember people remarking on how dark it was, even in, like, Daenerys on Dragonstone and Cersei in King's Landing, just how dark everything was. On top of that, they intentionally told the new costume designer to make cool colors, so everyone was wearing black, dark blues, and browns. That they wanted that to be the color palette. Well, it's winter. Everything should look cold. And this went to the point that not only were the colors muted, even the lighting levels, of course, went into the problems by like Season 8 with the Long Night Battle. What amazes me is that some people think that that was a snap decision or a mistake. Something doesn't get that far in production as a mistake. It looks like that because they wanted it to look like that in the Long Night. I have whole videos about this, that Benioff and Weiss don't happen in isolation. Sometimes you get fooled into thinking that because they're the only thing we see within the camera frame in the inside the episodes. But remember those behind-the-scenes documentaries like the Last Watch documentary, which was supposed to focus on the crew and worked a little too well, emphasizing there is an army of support staff and advisors surrounding them. That there's a career cinematographer, there's a lighting guy. The lighting guy whose sole career is tell them this is what the lighting levels look like here. And they would ignore them, that there were experts in the field telling them don't do these things. It's a lot like the horse safeties, stunt safety with horses that they ran into in Season 6 and at other points, where Sapochnik had to argue them down on a scale of months with the horse wrangler, telling the Benioff and Weiss, we can't have a melee scene with people and stunt horses. A stunt horse will panic, someone will get killed, probably the stuntmen, no one does that. And it took them months to be argued down. That when the horse wrangler, who's an expert, tells you a horse can't do that, you believe them. And when the cinematographer tells you, this is too dark to see anything, you need to increase the brightness levels, you believe him. They did this over their objections. And the weirdest thing is that these were things they knew about since the failed pilot. I've also made longer videos about this, check them out, but the head of HBO was yelling at them word for word, you don't know how brightness levels work, that the pilot is physically too dark to see anything. The first version of it, where Tamsin Merchant was Daenerys, they filmed her wedding in Morocco, and they filmed it outside, on location, so it cost millions of dollars. Outside, at night, under natural lighting, which means it's pitch black, and just backlit by fires from bonfires, so you couldn't see anything. Not to mention that they didn't use wide shots, but that's a whole other issue, but they can't claim ignorance, that the directors were yelling at them about you don't know how lighting levels work, that the head of HBO told them this is a problem, it is not impressing us to artistically have these low light levels or muted colors. Well, light levels are related too, but distinct from using color filters, but you see how they're related here. I don't know how they kept managing to do that. That season one, the color filters weren't that bad because they'd been yelled at that they misused them in the pilot. And then they just went right back to doing it like this naughty child who doesn't think they were wrong in the first place. That then, as the seasons progressed, they went, let's make it dark again anyway. Let's mute the colors and apply blue filters to everything. When they were directly told this is not how things work. And then, like, they got nominated for a directing award for season 8 anyway, but that shows you what the Emmys are these days. But this time around, they explained in the Den of Geek interview, they said, we didn't need to use color filters to represent, to distinguish locations anymore because this show doesn't cover as many geographically different places. That was an early decision we made. We're not using color filters again because they don't go to the wall again. They might briefly visit Winterfell in season 2. They wouldn't really need color filters for it. They're not really going to Dorne, or they're not going to east of the Free Cities with Daenerys' storyline like that. They're going to the Stepstones, which, they're islands, but most of this story will be in central Westeros, in the Riverlands. That's where most of the war plays out. Most of season 1 in particular is in King's Landing and Dragonstone. In and around King's Landing, Dragonstone, Driftmark is right next to Dragonstone, and bits of the Stepstones, which are a different part of the Narrow Sea, but they realized this is geographically more focused, we don't need to use color filters. So it's not just that everything doesn't look dark and blue, even the King's Landing stuff in Game of Thrones had this gold color filter applied to it, which makes the colors, they're not popping as much, they're not as differentiated, that when you have bright green and bright red, but they're both snapped through a gold color filter, they come out looking a little muted. Because this is the natural, there's no filters on it, I think they may have applied general color saturation to it, just to super saturate. The blues look more blue, the reds look more red. I'm not sure, but because it's not all in this gold color filter to look kind of warm and Mediterranean-y, to emphasize this isn't the wall, it's warm, during the tournament scene, just all the colors just pop in all of the heraldry you see. And that's a general directive that Martin gave them as well, that there were 3 things he said. One was fix some family tree thing, another was make the dragons distinct. A third thing he very specifically told them was, the colors were too muted in the last show. This is the Targaryen Golden Age, the age of decadence and pomp. That this is when there should be bright heraldry that really stands out. So this is fixing one of the many cinematography mistakes that Benioff and Weiss, through their ignorance and micromanagement of experts who were telling them, experts who knew better, telling them, please don't do this, they're making up for that. And it's the same guy. It's Miguel Sapochnik. I think they needed to do that. Have Sapochnik, one of their same directors, showing this is how colors should look when you're directing something like a normal person. That you're not snapping color filters to the point it drains everything. So, if people didn't know in words, why do the colors look so different now, there was a conscious choice of how to handle the cinematography with a capital C. And the unfortunate thing about cinematography is you don't really notice it until someone points it out, that it's subconscious, and once they point it out, you never fail to see it again. Like, the fact that the original show really wanted to show off tight close-ups of the lead actor faces to show them off, to the point of it was ridiculous. They were sacrificing story for it. They were rewriting characters to be in positions where they could give epic tight close-ups all the time. Like the White Hunt in season 7 exists for Kit Harington to have close-ups to pander him for a Golden Globe that never happened. That I can't unsee that now. And other people in my comments have said, it never occurred to us, the faces thing, and I only saw your videos after season 7, but dear God, now I can't unsee it. Which is good. That's what I'm trying to do. That, wow, they really are just focused on the goddamn faces all the time. That my hope is you play around with this, find clips of like Game of Thrones season 1, and then Game of Thrones every few seasons up to like season 8, even season 6, you realize they use these color filters and they've started overusing them, and this isn't what it's supposed to look like. It's not even what TV in general is supposed to look like. It's becoming hard to distinguish things on screen just as television. So I hope that now I've pointed this out, that no, the colors are all saturated, but natural saturation, they're not using filters anymore. That it's supposed to just look bright. Like this is the golden age, this is not high fantasy, but this is the height of this medieval epic. Everything looks colorful. It's because they're using normal professional cinematography again, which is just so weird that so many people said, seeing the first episode, it looks so different while it's still the same stuff. It's just shot better. Like I said, this is just I'm dashing it off intro video on this because everyone asked, why does it look so more colorful? After this, I'm going to do more in-depth stuff as an ongoing series on look at these other cinematography things that they actually used in the first few episodes that were not in the original show because they thought it distracted from the faces, like montage, camera movement, tilt angles. We never saw this much real cinematography. That people would see just the spectacle, the amount of money on screen in like Battle of the Bastards and say, wow, this is an amazing episode. And it's like the writing is terrible. And it's just close-ups of Kit Harington. And there's a lot of stuff flying around, and it's a very expensive shot. But this isn't how movies are filmed. Movies have wide shots in them. That they're not really using the camera that creatively. That you can't verbalize in a technical way what is so great about this. It's like someone walking into a museum and going, I like this painting by Monet or Van Gogh or something, and if someone asks you what are the technical aspects of it that you like, you're not an expert. That you need to be able to say, well, they're using color contrast here, this is drawing the eye with a perspective line. Now, I don't know that stuff, but I wouldn't presume to lecture someone, this is why this Van Gogh painting is better than this Mona Lisa or something, because I don't know the technical language of what they're using. That cinematography-wise, Game of Thrones was a failure, and the directors were not happy with how much they were being limited by that. So I'm going to do this fast and sloppy as the season progresses, just pointing out different things, and I'll do a more formal, better put together version after the end of season 1. We have time to go through, look how they're using actual cinematography that Game of Thrones didn't. And I need to do this because so much of what ruined the show was we're rewriting this to show off these epic faces. They killed off Daenerys to have these epic faces. Fundamentally, because that's what they think drama is. That's what they think television as an art form is. When there are principles and aspects of cinematography. And I'm not a cinematography expert. I don't need to be. I'm just pointing out some basic things that they worked in there.